All right, great. Well, thank you everyone for attending. And you know what, I'm gonna switch this mic right here. Okay. You guys hear me okay? Good. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining the panel. And we're here to talk about platform and cloud and how that relates to smart cities. First of all, my name is Mark Piening. I'm a principal with CMG Group, and it's a pleasure to be here. Just real quick, my background is 25 years in enterprise infrastructure and software. I've spent 10 years consulting venture-backed and PE-backed companies with their growth plans. I happen to also, coincidentally for this session, have been a 16-year MUD board member, so I learned a lot about what that's like, and we can meet for cocktails later about that experience. But actually learned a lot, and it's been very helpful for the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about today. So what I'd like to do is just invite each panel member to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their backgrounds, and then after that we'll talk more about their company. So may I start with Elena?
Sure. Elena Bondareva. I am an advisor with Ledger. We'll talk about that in a minute. My background is in transformational change. So for a little over 20 years now, I've pretty much focused on figuring out how do we do that better. Change is inevitable, but most of the time done really badly, and human dignity is undermined, outcomes are not achieved, and so starting with my postgraduate research at Cornell, I've pretty much focused on that. As a result, have helped establish a little over 20 organizations around the world within government, private, and nonprofit, many still going. That includes 4 Green Building Councils, Living Future Institute, and a number of others. And try to just, support organizations and initiatives that are promising to change the world for the better. Thank you.
Awesome. Neville?
I'm Neville Letzerich, 25 years or so in high-tech companies, large and small, and across all kinds of industries, and currently with Cisco Systems.
Great, thank you. Ziliang?
Hi, I'm Ziliang Zong. I'm currently a professor at the Computer Science Department of Texas State University. What I do is sustainable computing. So we do sustainable technology, innovation, and transformation. So basically, any existing technology, we want to make that more efficient. We want to make that more environmental friendly. For any new technology, we want to see how is that going to help with the environment. So that's what we do.
Great, thank you. Jim?
Thank you. I'll brag and say 38 years in the industry, so been here a while. My first job in 1982, they put a box on my desk and said, here's this thing called a personal computer. Tell us what to do with it. And that was the beginning of client server, which led to networking, which led to cloud, and here we are, accelerated into this COVID period where we're all familiar with the cloud. After I did that stint in digital, I got the chance to go to Japan and did this thing called the Open Software Foundation. Are there any people in technology around here that remember that, And so distributed computing environment is the heartbeat of everything we're here. The reason we're here today started with distributed computing environment, the DC protocol environment. And I proselytized that all through Asia for 5 years with IBM and DEC and all the guys. But then what came was virtual computing. We discovered VMs. So we created a digital provisioning infrastructure. Virtual Bridges, you might have remembered that Cisco was a partner of ours, but IBM OEM'd it, and it propagated with IBM. But virtual desktops, we did exactly what you're talking about, single system images and such things, propagating the changes, the rules, in a very efficient manner. But unfortunately, VMware and Cisco squatted us, and we're dead, and that technology will be resurrected some other day. But, and then I happen to now, after doing all the virtual desktops, I came across this opportunity, which is a regulatory information management platform, but I won't get into that.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that, but thank you, Jim, for that intro. So I think what you can see is we have a wide range of experiences across different dimensions of platform and compute over really decades, and also some opportunities that are interesting around cutting edge of innovation. So what I would like to do next is just invite each of you to tell us a little bit about your company and the product you offer, or the problem you're solving. And so, Elena, why don't we start with you again?
Sure. Ledger is headquartered in Australia. And now I was checking, last year I told you all we are in 8 countries. This year we're in 14, so that's a good update. It's a SaaS offering, so platform as a service, blockchain enabled. And its focus is enabling the tracing, tracking, and trading of 1, energy, 2, grid flexibility services, and 3, environmental commodities. So a little bit like a Google Suite or a Microsoft Suite, it has a suite of features that all hang off the ability to trace the provenance of energy, renewable energy. And the mission is to accelerate the transition towards the clean energy future and democratize access to clean energy around the world.
Great, thank you. We've heard from Neville, so why don't we save a couple minutes? But Ziliang, why don't you tell us a little bit about your research?
Right. So, so our research is on sustainable computing. I would like to share a little bit of a journey. I started my PhD in 2005. So at that time, I was thinking about, is there a research topic that I can do forever? So not just like doing the 4 years of PhD study. I want to study that for the next 20 years, 30 years until I get the professor, So I'm still doing the sustainable computing. So what I can tell you is that like back in 2005, when we talk about green computing, that was a very niche area. Only the people in the national labs, supercomputers, they talk about this. So my PhD dissertation was about energy efficient supercomputing, so that kind of thing. But later on, we see Steve Jobs and Apple invented iPhone, right? That has significantly transformed how we actually communicate everything, like daily lives on that. So because of the success of the iPhone, then we see the great success, kind of like mobile computing era comes, right? So after that, we see cloud computing. And then what worries me a little bit now is kind of like the technology is booming at a unprecedented rate, basically on that. So blockchain, so then we have the AI, then we have the AR, VR. Now we are having the metaverse on the horizon. So when we talk about that, I was kind of a little bit scared because everybody talks about how exciting metaverse is, but nobody talks about how do we actually build an efficient one. Because if you think about the metaverse, it's kind of like building all of these energy-hungry components, including cloud computing, blockchain, AR, AI, VR, high-quality rendering like games, environment, and everything. And then inside of this one, and Microsoft wants to build one metaverse, and NVIDIA wants to build another metaverse, and then Google probably build another, Meta will build another one. So we're going to have multiple of these virtual worlds on that, but nobody talks about fundamentally how do we solve this problem. Mm-hmm. So this worries me because when I see, when I actually study, when I was a PhD study HPC, nobody wants to touch the code about the weather modeling because that has been evolved like over several decades. Written using many different languages, right? This is so costly to change anything on that. After that, we see the blockchain, Bitcoin. Bitcoin is purposely designed, an inefficient algorithm, purposely designed for inefficiency to achieve the goal of distributed ledger on that. So when the Bitcoin becomes like a big ecosystem, we want to say we want to change that. Too late, the ecosystem too big. So it can't change that, but the metaverse is going to happen again. So we never learn from the lessons about what we're going to do. So once we build all of these, metaverse, all kind of things, we don't study right now, then sustainability is going to be a big issue in the future. So that's why our research is focusing on green cloud, green AI, green blockchain, and also metaverse in the future. We want to kind of like contribute from the research perspective as well.
Great, thank you. So far we've heard about really using blockchain to understand the exchange, the value, ways to measure and be able to transact around that currency that is energy. We've talked about security, of course, with Neville, and now we're talking about sustainability. Jim, tell us more about what you're doing at Grid Monitor.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, Grid Monitor is a cloud platform. And as I was talking before about evolutions of technology, I'm so excited about this because it represents the pinnacle of where we are at productivity, efficiency, and technology. We started with client server, we got to all the evolutions to cloud to where we are now. Thankfully, COVID accelerated everyone's familiarity with that. So you can expect all these people in the room to be familiar with cloud. If COVID hadn't happened, that wouldn't be so, right? So we take advantage of this opportunity to have cloud. But the problem we're solving is effectively busy professionals making several $100s an hour, lawyers, lobbyists, consultants, have to go across 3 different venues to understand the electricity market in Texas. They have to understand ERCOT and the working groups, they have to understand the Public Utility Commission, and they have to understand all the activities in the state legislature. And each of those involves meetings, video streaming, oftentimes overlapping. It involves hundreds and hundreds of filings a day, and it involves newspaper reports that might happen anywhere on the internet. So think of the arduous task of collecting, organizing, and updating that every day to stay on top of your job. So with the power of networking, computing, and security and all of this, we're able to point and make these data pipelines into our product to continuously collect these different streams. But the fun part about where we are with technology today is I can enrich that. I can collect, I can organize, and I can enrich. So what I do is I take the video, I strip out the audio, our company, and we create transcripts which we then load back into the player so you can navigate by the transcript. So if you remember what Mark just said and you want to find in the transcript about his summary, you could search that in our product and get the transcript, click it, and it would bring the playhead right to there, and you would watch Mark saying that. So imagine someone paid $400 an hour sitting in a 5-hour meeting for 5 minutes of information. You don't have to go to that 5-hour meeting. You get that 5 minutes of information. We let you follow things, we notify you. So it's really a modern system, a bespoke system, if you will, built off a platform that allows busy professionals to save dramatic amounts of time. So our core precept is that 80% of all your work in preparing a project is organizing, collecting, and updating the information. Then you get the insights after you've organized and prepared. So we're creating a system that continuously does that, and we didn't make it out of the blue. We worked with all the experts in the industry for the last several years. My partner's been at it about 8 years. I've been at it 4 years, and so I love doing these kinds of things, and this just makes so much sense. And what we're going to do is take it from ERCOT into the Railroad Commission, into the LEDGE, into other ISOs, into other disciplines. So this has infinite scalability as a platform, and we're perfecting it at the ERCOT level right now. So that's the technology, but if you're a regulatory professional or a busy electricity industry professional, I'd really love you to come and try a free demo or a free trial at www.gridmonitor.com and give me your feedback and tell me how it serves you or could serve you better. So.
Cool, great. So, maybe to paraphrase, it sounds like a 21st century Bloomberg with some dash of social media monitoring.
Yep, mix in a little Nexus and yeah, exactly.
Yep, that sounds great. Well, great. Well, thank you for that, everyone. Let's talk a little bit more about some specific examples of things that are happening out there so we can see what's going on in the wild. So, Elena, can you tell us, an example of a customer? Who's your customer? What are they doing? What problem did they pay you to solve for them? And how does that play out in the marketplace?
Sure. So because there's layers of features, I'm going to quickly give a couple different examples to illustrate that. So the very basis of Power Ledger is tracing the provenance of energy, right? And it's actually sounds so intuitive, and yet it's not happening as much as we need it to. Let's just take electric vehicles, right? Everybody is electrifying their fleets, and every event that I go to, and I speak a lot on e-mobility, I ask, so what, are you going to guarantee green charging? No, well then, we rest our case, that's just with a grid. So this is part of it. We can actually trace provenance of energy, including through public grids, private grids. And so one example I can give you is Equateur is a French company, energy retailer, and in April there were already 300,000 customers who on their phone were not just guaranteed clean energy, blockchain backed infallible record, they can actually choose their energy source. So imagine if you can go on your phone and go, you know what, I actually want Mark's solar because he's just installed it. I want him to have a better payback period. Or I'm really passionate about the wind farm kind of down the street. Or I actually am going to buy my energy from the Veterans Center because everybody donates their excess energy to them so that they can trade it. I'm going to buy it from them. That's extra money for their operations. So first up, it's this ability to choose your own energy mix. If we go kind of one layer up, because that is actually enabled by peer-to-peer trading, the world's largest peer-to-peer trading environment is operated by Power Ledger in Thailand, and it's grown from 4 buildings initially to close to a dozen now. And it's a precinct where different buildings have different profiles. So you have a school, you have a dental hospital, shopping center, a few apartment buildings. What is happening there is their energy profile is different. So when a school is generating solar on the weekend and in the evenings and then not using it, that is actually peak demand time for the shopping center. And school may not even be able to send or sell this energy back to the grid because, say, of curtailing, or increasingly around the world, there is such saturation of renewables during peak period that you might actually get fined for sending that. But fine, let's say the school has a chance of selling that excess energy to the grid, say, for 6 cents. At the same time, the shopping center's rate, let's just make it 9. Right? Its peak, that's what the grid wants to charge them. What the shopping center does, enabled by Power Ledger technology, is actually goes to the school and says, hey, let's split the difference. I'll give you 7.5. So school makes more money than they would have. Shopping center pays less. So just to give you a sense of what that means financially, combined in the entire precinct, on-site generation is only about 18% of their total demand. That's not a lot. Combined, they're saving about 25% on their energy costs every year as a precinct. And now I'm going to layer that even over that with just one more example, and this is now all the way to Australia. I was trying to take us a little bit around the world. And that is Asahi's largest brewery. They're in the Southern Hemisphere, and they wanted a carbon-neutral beer. It's actually VB. It's kind of a blue-collar beer. And they have a PPA, they have all kinds of things going on. But fundamentally, what Power Ledger enabled them to do is they are sourcing excess solar from their customers and paying them in beer.
I mean, who doesn't want to do
Right?
that, right?
So imagine every couple of weeks a van pulls up to your curbside and offloads as many cases of beer as $30 bundles of energy that you send to them. To you, this is free beer. You weren't home. You marked on your phone, sure, take it. To them, it's the very first in their entire history self-funding marketing campaign. And they get clean, traceable energy where they can, without greenwash, claim their carbon-neutral beer. And what I love about these kinds of applications is they render any distributed energy resource as a source of liquid funds. So imagine a future where if you have a solar panel, or maybe you give for graduation your kids a battery, and they actually go, you know what, I can trade this for student loan repayments, for Safeway, for Starbucks coffee. That can start really expanding equity opportunities on the ground as well. And kind of last layer there is that's why Tata Energy, which is India's largest retailer in Uttar Pradesh, the most populous state, 204 million people, a lot of them unelectrified, they partnered with Power Ledger for equity reasons primarily. They wanted to see if peer-to-peer trading and the kinds of things that I'm talking about had the ability to accelerate electrification. Not only did it, but people saw savings up to 46% through this peer-to-peer trading between residential, commercial, and institutional customers. So I'll pause there.
Awesome, that's great. So what we're really talking about here is we're making the market more efficient, right? And we're doing that with all kinds of ways to exchange, including blockchain tokens or beer. And so I think, it just kind of shows the kind of innovation that we can have when we start unlocking the marketplace. And I love the idea of actually people, a school and a shopping center being able to actually exchange the value, for what their capabilities are instead of being locked in, right? And so I think, one thing we can think about in this century, I think we all need to think about is, how do we unlock that power, right? How do we go from a utility with a monolithic rate structure and a monolithic model to something that's more decentralized and we break the business model like Professor Butler talked about earlier. So we talked yesterday and over the last couple of days also about storage and pushing things to the edge and decentralizing. And so, one of the things that seems to have stopped a lot of innovation in the past is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Can we talk a little bit about that? I know, Neville, you gave us some examples already, but when you think about security and you think about the kinds of things that people need, I mean, can you give us some other examples or other illustrations around?
I think one that sticks out is real-time data. And so there's I can't use their name, but a very large police force on the Northeast that needed to deploy thousands of cameras into schools. I think we all saw the danger of what happens when you can't see inside of a school and there's an active shooter situation. And so they were able to very rapidly deploy tens of thousands of cameras into schools. And the idea of that was push the capture all the way to the edge and then make sure that data is readily available at any time to deliver sub 3-minute response times from anywhere in the location should something even start to seem to go wrong, versus waiting what would have been hours plus on response and being able to take action. So I think a lot of the work, the things that we're seeing is how do people get data, respond to data quickly and thoughtfully, and then get the capture mechanisms out to where they're closest, but then a single pane of glass so you don't have bureaucracy stepping on each other to get a response to the populace.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. Ziliang, you talked a little bit about the progress that has been made from supercompute to now public compute in the cloud or public cloud. Can you tell us more about some of the things that are happening across that as it relates to sustainability and green?
Right. So last year, 2021, was the most exciting year for me because finally I see industry is moving fast. So in the past decade, I have been kind of feel like this is just academia problem, something like that. And then Google did a survey and Accenture did a survey. They asked, over I think 1,500 kind of like executives, is sustainability a good thing? Of course, everybody says it's a good thing. But if you ask them, do you have a concrete plan? What's your key sustainability KPI? Then 2/3 of them say, okay, I don't know how to answer that question, right? So then the other thing would be we have like our department, every year we graduate hundreds of software developers. They go to all kinds of companies, right? They write millions of lines of code every year on that, so all of this. But if you ask them, what is the impact of your code to the environment? They don't know. They don't know. We can't blame them because most of the universities do not have the green computing courses at all. They are not educated on this, so that's why kind of like the first thing I did was like created a green computing courses at undergraduate, master, and PhD level at Texas State University. So we want to give the message to the students. I did a small experiments in our classroom. So I basically gave a program for students who don't have any knowledge about green software, and then versus the students who are actually being taught about how to do this. The difference was amazing, like 50% of deduction on that. Students just don't know that. They don't know, so they don't know how to improve. So that's actually the young generation. So it's not like they're less motivated about this. It's just like we do not provide the proper training and education for them to do. Once they are trained, they know the power. They know, the capability of their coding and impact, so they would be more than willing to do that. That's the next generation of software developers. Then the other thing what I found was like, before I would turn to just do things, research in the lab. Then I realized it's not enough. I need to collaborate with the industry as much as possible because the real impact happened not in the lab, actually in the industry, right? So last year, I say this was the most exciting year because the industry formed the Green Software Foundation. So the founding member including Microsoft, GitHub, Accenture, and also ThoughtWorks. And then just last year, so now it's a little over a year, so the Green Software Foundation has included like 36 members on that. So we are very proud, like Texas State University was the first cohort of members. And then we are still, by today, the only university in the United States to join this Green Software Foundation. So what we're trying to do is to making the tooling and then also the standards, we work with the industry closely and then trying to make impact to the green software design. So that includes everything like cloud, AI, AR, VR, and blockchain network. So this is the things we're doing. So that's why I'm feeling, okay, I'm not alone. So it's like the industry is moving towards this rather quickly, so we get more resources. Like just last year, we did collaborative research with Accenture, with Green Software Foundation. So a lot of the ideas from the lab now can actually go into the industry. So hopefully we could build more collaboration like that. Okay.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And so really, the fact that, metaverse is really driving so much more demand is really pulling all these industry players in to help accelerate the market is what I'm hearing you say, which is great news. And so, let's kind of turn it a little bit more to, what's inhibiting some of the growth that we want to see. So, Jim, you have a lot of experience, not just in your current company, but across, the years of industry with standards and communicating those things. What are some things that you think need to happen for the energy market, specifically the utility grid market to, and all of its customers to be able to, drive innovation faster? What do we need to see happening?
You're throwing me a curveball there. Hey.
Well, you know.
That's all right. That's totally
all right.
fine.
Let's see what you got.
Yeah, I was ready with all my customers and my stuff. But no, it's definitely, it's continued collaboration. And I believe the heart of everything is openness. I think moded proprietary systems are ancient, and it's all about building roads and tollways to get people the right information, just what each of our panelists have been talking about. And it came to what you said about identity as being a key. And to me, and there's a big long answer here maybe, but self-sovereign identities and self-controlled identities lead to more empowerment of the users who are creating the data. We are the engines of their algorithms, and it should be reversed, and there should be a dividend paid back to the identity holder, and that sets a whole new organization of life, actually. But for the energy industry, that allows autonomous systems to transact more easily. It allows stuff behind the meter to happen more efficiently. It happens in front of the meter, can coordinate more efficiently. You said it with the identity, the security, the infrastructure. This is the key, the first foundation we have to have right. We've done all the protocols over the years. We've done the science. We've got the scaling. I think one of the bigger things, and Ziliang didn't quite go into the quantum side of things, but that's going to disrupt a lot in the future because all of our encryption will have to be quantum resistant, right? But anyway, I do think the other problem is jurisdictions.
Yes.
I love Texas, I love ERCOT, but it's very proud, and it will probably not join the other ones, even though there's a lot of pressure to join the other ones, and it's hard to collaborate when you don't join the other things.
Right.
I'm from Boston, so I can say that. As a Texan, people say, we're staying independent, but there's a lot of things, and it's more the regulatory environment and the pace of regulatory change that's going to keep us from progressing. And if we can have openness and transparency, people will feel more confident adopting things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of what you're doing with Grid Monitor helps accelerate that, right? Because we need to understand legislation, we need to understand what the blockers are. I mean, I think the gentleman from Sky H2O yesterday was, telling the lady at Austin Water, like, how do I sell to municipalities? Like, how do I do the things you're doing, right? Because you're able to drive innovation because you're one, and I'm a vendor, and so it makes it hard.
And if I may use some of the lines I'd already prepared, if you don't mind, on my
That's
customers,
fine.
because it does go into what you're saying. It's this efficiency. We know workforce is tight. We know all of the skills are retiring, and we're downskilling to fill jobs. So if we can automate more and more and put more intelligence into the system, we're force multiplying all of our companies, with fewer people doing more value-add things. So technology is the secret. When you go to the supermarket and there's no pizzas made or there's no sandwiches made, you're not going to hire people to make sandwiches at $25 an hour. You can't afford to make a profit. You get a machine to do it. And that's what we're going to force things more and more into automation. It's just, there's too many jobs with too few people. The cloud has burst all these new jobs. We have transportation jobs. We have online worker jobs, reviewing documents, collecting documents. There's whole new categories of work that didn't exist 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that's enough.
That's helpful. Thank you. So, obviously we, as smaller companies, I've been an entrepreneur, and when you're trying to sell in and break into new markets, you need the big guys, the big players, to actually lay some groundwork. So, Neville, when you guys see these kinds of opportunities, these market opportunities at Cisco, obviously, we all need you to kind of break the ground, right? Smash some concrete and make the ground fertile. There's a lot of things that we're starting to see. I think one of the partners or sponsors here, Anterix, is partner Cisco's in looking at substation technology. What are some things that Cisco's doing, across smart cities that is helping? What are you investing in that is more meta, that is helping the industry move? Is there anything that comes to mind that you could share?
Yeah, I think so. Some of the Communities Reimagined stuff that we looked at today is a big investment area for us, and honestly, it's a lot of meetings like this where we get to hear things, see things, meet folks. There's a lot of grassroots. So Cisco is a massive company, but a lot of stuff actually happens grassroots. A lot of stuff done through partnerships. As we try markets or different things, we recognize to move fast in areas, we want to use our girth when it's time to help with things like regulatory, where we can push and try to get stuff done, but then also leverage partnerships and engagement with smaller, more nimble organizations so that we can move faster. Some of that's going to be through acquisition, some of that's just through native partnerships. Then we have tons of different funding mechanisms we actually use to invest in companies, to invest in so they can stay small, they can stay independent. So kind of looking at it through multifaceted lens.
Well, thank you. Don't stop. Yeah,
Can
please.
I jump in on that?
Yeah.
So I think this is where these partnerships are incredibly valuable because it is in the demonstration. So when I told you the peer-to-peer example, right? Everybody smiles, everybody laughs. When you experience something like this, you don't want the old stuff anymore, right? And for example, I'll give you one. The PowerLedger's newest platform is actually a marketplace for RECs, renewable energy certificates. So think of it as Airbnb for that particular environmental commodity, and it will be others as well, carbon credits, etc. And what that will do is what it did when you could go to Trivago and search for your hotel, because you'll be able, especially if you're aspiring towards 24/7 carbon-free energy, right? You will literally be able to say, I want to buy renewable energy certificates generated in this area in this time of day because that's when I'm short from my curve. Right now, that market is as opaque as booking travel tickets used to be. Remember, you used to have to go to an agent, and you didn't know if yours was that good or not because there is no way to check. You can't really have visibility of prices. This is how RECs are currently traded. It's all through a broker. It's completely opaque. And if you're selling 20,000 of these, a 50% difference in what you're able to get or save is 10 grand, right? So that kind of software in the marketplace is going to be incredibly transformative, but it's the likes, and like 3 Degrees is now on there, and some other big players. It's going to take that heft of people going, we can do things differently. Because then you see them, experience them, and you're like, which travel agent? I don't remember travel agents, right?
I love that concept of energy as a currency and something you can actively trade, but you're right.
Yeah.
How the hell do you do it? It just seems so obscure, and where would you even go? And I think somebody's got to make that a whole lot easier.
And if I can just add to Jim's answer in terms of obstacles,
please.
What you're touching on is the mindset. And we are very passive when it comes to energy. Look, I've established, as I mentioned, close to half a dozen helped establish green building councils. So I know we can do really well around energy efficiency. But at the end of the day, all of us flick the light switch on when we want it, and we just pay the bill at the end of the month. Completely oblivious to what's going on the grid when the grid is struggling, when there is reverse flows and duck curves and all of the rest of it. So a lot of this is the mindset shift, right? We need to start thinking about energy the way we think about our checking accounts. Is this a good time for me to buy a trip to, I don't know, wherever, right? Or, battery becomes a credit card, right? So that I don't have to check my checking account. I just use the battery, and then I just top it up when the time is right. The future of energy is interactive, and actually switching to that is a mindset shift. And until we start thinking that way, we don't even realize what becomes possible and how much money you can end up with in your wallet just by bringing your clean charge in your electric vehicle and your Ford 150 Lightning, charge it at home with guaranteed clean energy. Drive to the movie theater, watch your movies for free, because the movie theater needs that clean charge in peak. And they'll even throw in the popcorn, right? These things become possible, and they are live somewhere in the world. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. But it takes this mindset shift in terms of both an enabler and currently an obstacle.
Yeah, I mean, I think, until we it's almost like we need to extend the stack diagram, Neville, that you showed in your presentation, right? Because it shows applications, but the applications, there's a whole set of applications inside of that application box that would help expose what you're talking about, which is we have to be able to think about currency. We have to actually measure and be self-aware of what we're consuming. Otherwise, we can't actually hold ourselves accountable. It's too hard. It's too fluid. So to that end, I guess there's a lot of opportunity to continue to expose this. Are there other examples that you've seen that we could apply here that we should be talking about? Obviously we have PowerLedger as one, but is there anything else in your experiences, gentlemen, that you've seen that we should be sharing with the audience around this idea of visibility, transparency as it relates to
I'll pass. I think I
energy?
said enough. You guys go ahead.
Yeah, so transparency is the first step, I think, right? If you don't know how much you are consuming, and then you cannot improve that, you cannot save that. So it's a very simple on that. So I think beyond the transparency, what I have seen is, like big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, they all have been pioneers again in sustainability. However, for the medium and the small businesses, they are not actually doing that very aggressively at this moment on that. So I think one thing would be kind of like if you cannot do it by yourself and then just move into the cloud and just use AWS or Microsoft, then that will help you automatically, right? So because the big companies are doing that. However, in the future, I think for the new generation of users, once like Elena said, if their mindset changes, one possible mindset will be when they see more and more extreme events, weather events, they will think about when do they actually watch YouTube? When do they actually do this? If we have the metaverse, maybe we'll have something that has never happened before, like a carbon-aware login. At this time, the electricity, is, mostly are not renewable, so we can only limit this many of users allowed to log into the metaverse, because once you log in, it's going to be consuming a lot of resources on that.
Kind of like Disneyland. Only so many people get in per day. Is that what you're saying?
So,
okay.
Yeah, so you never know. Like in new generation, I think. So Elena, if you could maybe somebody give a talk in my class and then talk to these young generations of students, like how do they feel about this future? How do they feel? So one thing about being excited about professor would be I talk to them so directly. So I know the young generations, like what they're thinking about that. They teach me every year about new things happening. So I think that's important. So yeah, I would just stop here.
If I just come back to the key notions that have led us to here, that Neville was talking about, it started with heterogeneous systems, getting them all to work, but then getting aggregated, pushing it to the edge, having a better security. The algorithms, there was a gentleman was talking earlier about secure edge algorithms and pushing stuff out down. So ultimately, as we harness all this natural energy, the renewable energy, and we self-power more efficient systems, it gets to these aggregations of applications that you mentioned. The application layer is actually all these configured sub-applets creating a new experience, right? And that's really where the fun is up. Now that we've made these stacks modernized, we've had a nice refresh, we can use all these web services and other legacy things. The other big piece you mentioned is hybrid. Everything's got to talk with everything. These clouds shouldn't become moats in themselves or moated, kind of assets. They should be able to talk freely with each other in a lingua franca. This idea of heterogeneous systems again, interoperable. Yeah,
have to be.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, the session, panel is called Platform and Cloud, and we can almost start saying like, yeah, we kind of got that somewhat figured out. Let's focus on the edge. Let's focus on sustainability. Let's focus on
information aggregation.
And information aggregation, compliance, and of course the marketplace, right? And so, I think that's really where the heat map will take you, right? As we look at that. So, when you think about like, with Power Ledger, you're trying to help cities, buildings, join the network, right? What is the obstacle that makes it hard for someone to say yes? What do we all need to know about that we can perhaps help you solve?
Well, probably I would say, especially in Texas, that there are no obstacles. So I think there's a lot of perceived, right? No, but there's a lot of perceived obstacles, right? People listen to this, and I think for anything new, your reaction is, and part of this is, especially at the decision-making level, we don't want to look stupid. We don't want to make some mistakes that leave our head on the chopping block. So one thing maybe to know is there are no obstacles. Everything I described today can be done in Texas today. And that's kind of part one, right? And because Power Ledger is a white-labeled solution, most people will never know, right? So if it is a Centerpoint, if it is any energy retailer, whoever has the consumer interface would just add this functionality into their phone. It is literally that easy, and that's probably the thing to know, especially in Texas.
Good. All right, so it's funny because we have less panelists and more time, and so let's see. One of the things that we had talked about this week also was AI and ML applications, and just being able to leverage the cloud for that. So, obviously, at Cisco, you guys are deep in that space. Is there anything that you can share about that that innovation set and what you're doing there?
Yeah, it's gosh, how much time do we have? There's a ton of research, a ton of work around machine learning. I think everybody has different definitions when you get into machine learning and artificial intelligence and what's AI really mean and all the various different things. At the end of the day, a lot of those engines are only as good as the quantity of data you pump into them. If I've got an AI engine that's super smart and I dump just little bits in, it doesn't learn anything. And so really leveraging the algorithms are great. I think it's the data sources. There's a lot of concerns around data privacy and being able to keep things, especially as you cross jurisdictions and various different elements. So tons of research, tons of exciting things. Obviously on the security side, a lot of the threat intelligence, and that's very actively shared. We share a lot of information with competitors as they share it with us, because the goal is to keep everybody else safer. We do a lot of work, though, as you take AI and ML and leverage those engines in broader applications around efficacy, transparency, interactions between systems. And a lot of that is just bulk data. But I do think it's interesting as we talk about this, there's a ton of work we're doing around sustainability inside of that as well. Otherwise, you will just, you take so much energy and so much stuff to do all the computation and all the crunching. So I do think quantum is an area of continued interest as well. I know we haven't kind of broached that, but that's a big area as well that's emerging on what's going to be the reality behind it, how do we do it, and then what are the implications.
Yeah. Yeah, I think quantum is a game changer, right? I mean, in fact, there's still so much to be learned and so much to still apply. Sorry, I keep losing my, there we go. So, let's shift to business models and talk a little bit more about that. I mean, you're clearly breaking some business models, which is great. We're getting to think about, again, energy for beer, peer-to-beer. That's just such a great little saying. But, how do you see, and again, I'll come back to Cisco, like you guys have so many customers, and so these models are already strong, and people are used to buying boxes, and now they're buying cloud. What things do you think are possible in the future that Cisco could help us apply in utility or in water or in different models so that we can try to change the business model to drive the innovation? Is there anything?
There's probably a ton of different things to look at. I think the physical to digital is going to be key. And as you look at systems, even systems that are physical in nature, opening and closing of valves, turning things on and off, as things become more and more digitized and then they need to be accessed from anywhere in the world, one of the biggest changes in the pandemic, we hire people everywhere now. We've shut down and downsized a lot of our offices as far as the physical space, and now people work from anywhere. That means people need to have accessibility from anywhere. So I think there's a lot of dynamics and a lot of shifts around those elements. And then I think when you look at the different business models that are out there because of digitization, how can you get information? How do you get, and I think it goes back a little bit what you were saying earlier, around getting things connected and being able to connect people, connect communities. So you go from kind of physical to digital, and then the connectivity and opening those pathways so that companies with great ideas get that kind of purview. And I think the last aspect is leveraging our investment arms to invest in the innovative companies, not necessarily just acquire everything. And we love to acquire stuff and hug it, sometimes too tight. Invest in areas of innovation, let them remain independent and continue to grow on their own.
Yeah, when I think about like when Scott was up here yesterday talking about Pecan Street and what is happening there's all these sensors that are getting deployed, all the data that's getting captured. And once we capture the data, we can start studying, well, is there a different way to price this, right? Is there a different way to cost it? And I think the same thing holds true for what you're doing. And so I think sensor industries yesterday, when Nick was talking, also was talking about just a valve between a toilet and the tank. I mean, just now that we know, make decisions. What Austin Water's doing, where we're starting to measure, and so hopefully we'll start incorporating those.
And Mark, even think about some of the presentations we saw during the lunchtime hour.
Yeah.
All the different cameras being attached to drones and all the different layers of information and data that brings. Yeah. Where are hotspots? Where are potential issues? Where I think getting that data and being able to leverage it in unique ways opens up the different business models. Give it to the really brilliant students and others that can go and take this and create ideas we can't even conceptualize right now. But getting that data, making it available widely is going to be a key to enabling some of those businesses.
Yeah, that's something I want to add on. The biggest challenge is for researcher, we don't get the data.
Yeah.
The companies don't want to release the data to the researchers. Then we have a lot of enthusiastic students, but if we don't have the real world data, the study has limitation into it, right?
We'll give you some data.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Yeah,
And,
that'd be
and,
perfect.
and I might just build on that as well in terms of what you're all saying in terms of the economic development and just making the universe bigger. If you have heard the term zero-sum game, it usually refers to this very outdated, disproven approach that if somebody wins, somebody has to lose, right? That's a zero-sum game. We're not looking at that. What we can be looking, though, is making our universe bigger. So let's just take this. By 2030, if you wanted to drive for Uber or Lyft, you have to drive an electric vehicle. Most Uber and Lyft drivers are from lower socioeconomic communities. They are actually charging deserts. And it's very difficult for those individuals to get electric vehicles. If you imagine that, like you described, plugging people into the internet who didn't have access to the internet. If we start looking at what these platforms can do to actually lift more communities to the level of these empowered, prosperous citizens. So imagine using a platform like PowerLedger. You can collectively buy that electric vehicle, right? You can actually charge whenever you're not running them. You can use vehicle to grid to actually back up your grid with flexibility services. You can actually use that for emergency services, right? You might go and park at a hospital, park at an airport, and say, look, we're not using it. If you need it, discharge it. Leave me 10% so that I can get home. If payback on investment starts accelerating and we change the business case for how people look at these resources, we're building assets in the community, we're building a behavior, and we're kind of lifting communities that actually, if we don't, they will probably get further left behind, right? Because Teslas, people who buy Teslas in California are not the ones primarily driving your Uber, right? So we can use this to actually have greater benefits than the sum of the parts if we look at what this enables and go and help more people take the benefit.
This reminds me of Anders' story about, his F-150 Lightning, and he's gonna charge at work for free and all the things. And it's also a storage device, right, for storage. And so, just thinking differently about what are this collection or combination of use cases and how does it change the business model, change the how we fund it, right? So that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, we have a few more minutes, and I want to make sure, with the folks that are here, that if you'd like to ask some questions, we can jump into some questions and give you an opportunity to fire something surgical that I haven't yet asked. Is there anyone in the room that has something for one of the panelists?
And while you're thinking of that question, if I might just
Please,
add
John.
on it,
Yeah.
continue Elena's comment, everything that we do and I've always done is about making the world a better place. It's not BS, it's an actual motivation, and that means win-win. And if you're not serving the customer's needs and creating an honest transaction, then you're taking advantage of people. And so it's just a business awareness. I wish people went into it and know that they could have mutually winning outcomes. And it is possible,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's encouraging in general that this whole conference, that's really what I see people trying to do, right? And including what we're talking about now. And, thank God, really. That we're able to kind of poke through some of these business models through this innovation.
Well,
And,
I also,
Yeah,
I didn't get
please.
asked about business models. I thought I might, but
Yeah, please.
one of the points in Neville's slide of the stacks with infrastructure as a service platform, but software as a service.
Yeah.
The best thing that's ever happened as a guy coming out of, stateful systems is software as a service. I don't have to maintain anything in their system. I don't have to get calls. I own the stack. I can put third-party pieces in there and don't have to worry about I can't sell the company later because it's encumbered. It's just so amazing. People don't understand how, but there's a flip side too, because I had to fill out a cybersecurity questionnaire for one of my major utilities, and it was 71 questions. And it was like, all your data center people trained on this. And I'm like, we're like, maybe, 2 sets of hands, people, and we don't have those roles. But it's just a flag. Thankfully, it was just a survey, though, because I actually got the order, despite saying no. Anyway.
You know, it's funny when you describe that, you know, example again, it literally, I guess I'm aging myself, but it sounded like utility computing from back in the day, which is its own kind of irony given what we're talking about.
If I may, that's the last analogy that, you know, really computing started with mainframes, right?
Yeah.
And utility is the ultimate mainframe, right?
Yep.
And we've gone through computing through this fruit fly evolution into now we're in the cloud.
Yeah.
And now the utility world needs to adapt, and it's looking at us. We've evolved to this point. We can just say, let's do that. We don't have to go through all this iteration.
Yes.
So it's a beautiful convergence, and that's why I love being in the energy industry and the software industry at the same time.
There was
Good.
There's a
Hi,
question.
my name's Antonio Puente. I just have a question for Neville regarding the cybersecurity platform you were discussing, and you were discussing the threat detection and having your on-site agents reviewing, as well as a combination of AI, and with some of the platforms that are out there that are publicly traded, such as Sentinel One or CrowdStrike, where Sentinel is one going pretty much to just an AI platform. There's no human interaction to address the threat that as it's happening in real time. How is Cisco system differentiating themselves from those competitions?
Yeah, great
the
question.
models?
Great question. So when you look at threat detection and response, you will see vendors out there who'll say, oh, yeah, you don't need people anymore, it's just systems. I don't think we agree with that. We have threat researchers, because the threat landscape changes so rapidly. Can you use systems? Absolutely. Do we use a lot of artificial intelligence ourselves? Of course. I think we're also, one of the ways that we look at and differentiate with that would be the accessibility. We have over 300,000 security customers around the world connecting into our systems. So that gives us a lot of visibility into what's going on, how people are trying to act. And oftentimes, yes, there are bespoke actors out there that will target a very specific individual with a very unique attack. What they'll often try is to repeat things around. So when we can find something like that, we can see those patterns and we have that visibility. Then sometimes, yes, a lot of the systems can stop people from getting in. You can recognize different things. Then if you do get breached, that's where also some of the threat detection, that response element, so to an incident response, that's where the humans matter a lot. So you've got to get in and figure out where they were, how long they were there, did they move laterally. In some breaches, you actually want to leave them there. You want to look and go, okay, now we know who they are and we know what they're doing. We're actually going to watch them. And you're watching for the patterns, and you're watching, so then you're taking that profiling and you're feeding it back into the systems, which in a weird way, and I don't want to use the word game lightly, but it is very adversarial, watching patterns, putting that back into the systems. The adversaries are watching. So that's where you'll hear kind of red team, blue team. There is a very heavy human factor in being able to see patterns, recognize different elements. Then there's also a side where the systems need to come in and be top tier in recognizing things as well. We believe you need both. And happy to catch up afterwards and talk like different scenarios and stuff also.
Kind of reminds me of when I go to Disneyland, I want someone to actually like push the button to make sure that I get on it and then it works. Yeah, thanks.
Hello, I was wondering if anybody had any comments on the idea of cloud computing as a centralized technology versus blockchain as distributed?
Yeah, sure. Blockchain works at a very different level at the protocol. You know, it's a protocol at the application level, if you will, that's riding on top of all this infrastructure that's keeping your compute, your storage, all of your networking. All that's, well, you probably do better on the 7-layer model, but jump in. But basically, blockchain works at a different level than the cloud. It runs on-premise, it runs in the cloud. Blockchain is more of an application than infrastructure, even though it's infrastructure application, if you will. You want to?
I think well said. And I want to dig on your question just a little bit. You're talking about cloud versus blockchain as two different models kind of comparatively? Or are you like one versus the other? Is that kind of where you're going as far as like maybe the merits of either one? I would agree that, yeah, I mean, I think kind of to your point, the cloud would be more the application layers that are going to give you redundancy, things that you can do as a service and you can push and leverage those in the cloud. Blockchain would be a methodology or a way to do certain things in the cloud because it sits at that application layer and takes advantage of cloud infrastructure. So they kind of, it's almost looking at kind of your particular need and then saying what's best for my particular entity.
And in terms of energy trading, let me put it this way. So one of America's largest retailers trades renewable energy certificates, both voluntary and mandatory. And right now it takes them 2 years to reconcile that before they can actually issue their sustainability report and be ready for an audit. 2 years. With the blockchain application, it can be, we'd say instantaneous, right? But it depends on the frequency. You can monitor it in 1 minute, 5 minute, hour, whatever the increment is. This is when you get the data. So that is the difference of kind of using that application in terms of speed and then auditability. Because again, there is not a central trusted entity that needs to vouch, right? Blockchain distributes that decision making, making that kind of what they call an infallible record. So those would be the reasons for why blockchain. A lot of what I described is simply impossible without it. The peer-to-peer, if you have to wait 2-3 months to actually reconcile report from what you generated on your rooftop and then me sitting there figuring out how much beer to give you, it just would simply not be feasible or desirable.
So if I could add a little bit on that. So very well said with all the panelists. So what I want to say is, if we look back for the history, I would like to keep open-minded about current technology, like the cloud computing. Cloud computing is not a new thing, right? So with academia, we talked about cloud computing 20 years ago already about that. But at that time, we cannot imagine today's cloud computing. When we talk about blockchain, it's still in the early stage. When we have the metaverse, so what kind of applications we may have, we don't know. Right, so it's like, I would say like keep that open-minded because my experience was like before we had we changed from 3G to 4G, we don't think about 4G will be so powerful, would so kind of change dramatic about that because at the time of 4G was invented, non-molecular applications. Just like at the time of 5G is introduced now, non-molecular applications. But given 10 years, who knows, right? So I would say maybe the cloud computing and blockchain technology, I will keep that open-minded. So because their potential is unlimited, I just don't know.
Great question.
Hi, David Inbar, Digitalytics. Going back to this whole issue of multi-cloud, hybrid environments, applications that run at different places. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on security around moving data between those different environments and different applications?
Yeah, definitely. So the reason we see the kind of the hybrid multi-cloud world, if you go into Microsoft does a great job when you're on Azure. You go over to GCP, they do it in there. As you start trying to move stuff across security policies, things get blurred and mixed. What if you could set a centralized policy so data is securely moved, stored, and leveraged in those systems, but you set it in one place so that you can actually move stuff across and give that. I mean, the whole idea goes back to portability, not getting that vendor lock. And again, not knocking any one of those systems. They're great partners of ours. We compete in different areas. We believe that getting locked in there and trying to manage everything in one gets to the point where you're kind of locked in. So that's exactly what we're focused on, is giving you the data portability and the services portability so you can move up and across as needed and not have to think about it and manage it. You manage it in one place, and then if a policy needs to be propagated down, we would propagate it down into the systems and then update it as necessary.
If I could add to that. Sure. The company I sold to IBM was an access control company, and probably 10 years ago was securing 100 million people a day by IBM. And it was a very simple concept. It started basically from host to network, object, identity, and operation. And that was the fundamental principle behind what we sold to IBM for about 150 million. Yeah. And that's working, everyone IBM stuff propagated. And it came out of OSF's RPC and DCE stuff. But anyway, I just want to say it's this same thing that's been inherited. The heterogeneous came first, and then the access control was laid on, because when we first did it, if you could get onto a system, you could see everything. There was no fine-grained access control on a host at all. And so the network had to overlay this, and it's the same thing we do with multi-cloud. We basically create a federated layer above them that is a lingua franca of security properties, as simple as what we say. Yep. Who are you, what do you want to do, and what object do you want to do it to? Yeah,
and that who are you, and getting that very specifics, who are you, what are you? But the whole idea also is making this a whole hell of a lot easier. It's just too hard. There's too much lingo, there's too many acronyms. how do I just make this easy? This is my business. This is the policy I want to set. I want to put it in plain language. Propagate that down into the systems. Tell me if it needs to be updated. Tell me if there's an issue with it. And let me go run my business and take a lot of this complexity away. And that's what we're really trying to do.
Thanks.
Actually, it's a good lead-in for my question, and that is in the multi-cloud here, the state that I see things in right now, you kind of have to choose which cloud you're going to be programming in, and you get little different services that you can be working with there. And as we go to the multi-cloud, what is maybe the economic incentive is the right term for how those get merged together by the folks there?
Oh yeah, so I think what we're seeing is because people do want that multi-cloud approach, the large cloud vendors would like to convince you that you go into just their cloud, you get a lot of economics and a lot of savings. I think we've all heard that story for decades over different ways that technology has worked. So you see a lot of people saying, I just don't want vendor lock-in. Maybe I'm going to leverage certain applications in certain clouds, so maybe I'll use certain applications in Microsoft, certain applications or services out of AWS, et cetera. And also remembering, I've got my private data center. So still having those on-prem, and I need to be able to share those data with, and some of those are really old systems, but they do what they're supposed to do. I want to make sure, I'm not going to go rewrite that. There's no reason for me. Let me get that data and leverage it in conjunction with some of my more private or public applications, et cetera. So the economics really come in and having the flexibility to do what you need to do in the system that provides those services and looking at your different, if you're building your own apps or using your own developers, where do they want to develop? As it makes sense and what services they need for that app, and not being constrained to one, but then having the security and data portability across that to make it easier for you. So then there's the economics as maybe Microsoft changes their economics, but Amazon's become better. You have an acquisition, whatever, there are a number of different things. You're not locked in where now it's this big forklift move to try to open things up.
Kind of reminds me of some of the things we talked about around the grid, right, or around substations. Like there's some legacy applications that you just have to wrap, like Richard was talking about. So,
if I could add to that, though, it comes back to the virtual desktop world. One of the reasons people wanted to move to virtual desktops is you get above that differences in the infrastructure. So the biggest use case for multi-cloud and for what I did before is when you combine companies that have invested systems and they can't interoperate, and you need to create bridges between them. That's the biggest motivation for a multi-cloud. You're going to continue to buy companies, and they operate in different environments, and you need to be able to have bridges or interoperability between them. So,
thank you.
Quick question: denial of services is on the hike. How am I going to deal with the cloud when this is a reality that I have to actually negate?
Nanoservice is yours.
So how are you, tell me about are you talking about just the containerization, like the microservices, microsegmentation?
I'm asking you.
I'm trying to ask what your question is. Like, what are you?
The question is, how do you, as you said, how do you segment? How do we begin to figure out, obviously, how to extend a firewall? What is a cloud going to actually do in terms of extending that firewall? How are you going to deal with DevSecOps? How are you basically going to deal with the man in the middle, irrespective in the enterprise, that ultimately can impact a cloud?
DevSecOps.
Yeah, I mean, it really is DevSecOps. And there's a number of different things. You see a shift left in security for how applications are being developed. And so a lot of application security being now thought of and pushing security into where apps are being developed, especially with nanoservices, microservices, containerization. You have to check there because some of those configuration challenges can cause obviously a lot of big challenges down the line. Even best in class, still things can get through. So you've got to shift left around how you're developing your apps. You've got to provide the functionality to have your containerized applications and capabilities, testing those as needed. The monolithic testing days typically aren't happening as much anymore. You're testing down at that layer and then all the way along. And then you build those same business rules, though, into your firewalls, et cetera, so that you've got multiple layers of your technology and security strategy working together. So you've got to go all the way to where the apps are being developed, all the way to the end game, and that's where user, device, network, and cloud security come together, married to the app security itself.
Well, good. Well, we are 6 minutes over the schedule time. Hopefully, everyone found that very helpful and insightful. I just want to give the panel a round of applause. Thank you very much.
You guys did great.
All right. All right, I think we have a little time for mingling, so if anyone wants to ask some questions, come on up. Thank you.